All right, my guest this week has accumulated a career in show business that many actors would die for. From growing up on the mean streets of Chicago to the bright lights of Hollywood, my guest this week, actor Michael Madsen, has become one of Hollywood's most sought-after character actors. During his 35-plus years in showbiz, he has starred opposite some of the greats in the history of Hollywood cinema. Some of his many films include roles in Reservoir Dogs, Hateful Eight, Thelma Louise, Donnie Brasco, Free Willy, The Doors, Kill Bill 1 and 2, Mulholland Falls, and most recent, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He has also appeared in numerous television shows as well. It's an honor to have this gentleman on my show this afternoon, folks. Mr. Blonde himself, actor Michael Madsen. Michael, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time today.
It's my pleasure. That was quite an introduction. I wish you were my agent.
I'll take it. I'll take 5%. 5%.
That was a pretty good job, man.
Hey,
5% man. I'll go for.
Hey, listen, 6 years of high school, and it's not too bad, huh? I didn't do too bad.
Well, I guess we're both lucky to have made it that far.
Oh my God! I want to start off. I mean, like I said in the intro, you're growing up in really tough streets of Chicago. You're probably doing some things that you probably shouldn't be doing as a young kid. How in the world do you end up becoming an actor from all of that, being surrounded by that?
Well, I ask myself that question all the time. I think perhaps I should have been a lumberjack. Or my father was a firefighter in Chicago. He very much wanted me to be a firefighter or a policeman. And, I that's probably what I would have done. I really, I worked a lot of jobs and I did a lot of things before I ever got in front of a camera. I was a pipe fitter. I worked as a orderly in a hospital. I drove a tow truck for a couple of years. Wow. I was big on building race cars, and I was a landscaper, and I painted houses. And,
but did you ever?
Believe me, I worked my butt off for a long, long time before that ever happened. It was kind of an accident, actually.
Right.
Obviously, I grew up watching Kirk Douglas and Robert Mitchum and Burt Lancaster, Lee Marvin, and those kind of guys.
You're like myself. You're a classic film buff. That's what I am. I'm a classic movie guy. Edward G. Robinson. I'm the toughest mobster on the South Side. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever see Soylent Green? That was Edward G's last movie.
What was it?
Soylent Green with Charlton Heston.
No, I didn't see that one.
I thought you were an Eddie G fan.
I'm a huge Eddie G fan. Come on. I love classic.
How could you not know that?
Yeah, I didn't know that one. I'm a classic film guy. I love Eddie G.
Yeah, sure.
What's your favorite classic film?
Well, that'd be a toss-up between Shane, I guess, in the Western genre, or One-Eyed Jacks, or
Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando, One-Eyed Jacks. Yeah, Film Noir.
Yeah, he directed that, by the way. Stanley Kubrick was the original director. Him and Marlon didn't get along, so Stanley got fired, and that's the only picture that Marlon ever directed.
Wow. Very good, Michael.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's a pretty damn good movie. It's a good Western.
Yeah, they're good. We don't make Westerns anymore. Then Hateful Eight and stuff like that.
I did the Hateful Eight. I did one called Renegade. I did a remake of High Noon, and I did Wyatt Earp, so...
Yeah, right. Not to get off track. Right, but not to get off track, but why do you think Hollywood doesn't make Westerns anymore? Because they were huge in the 50s and 60s.
Well, I think that it's probably because of financial reasons. It's not a cheap picture to make, and there's probably a lack of content. A lack of scripts around like that, and it's probably it's an iffy endeavor, I think, making a cowboy picture, unless you do some gigantic budget, with some big name people in it, or you make a low indie Western. I don't know. The big thing nowadays is the superhero pictures. I don't know. Maybe they'll create a superhero who's a Western guy.
Yeah, maybe. So, Michael,
super cowboy.
Yeah, super cowboy with their superpowers, right? That'd be something.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, I'll be in it.
I'm perfect for it.
I can ride a horse. I'll be in it. We'll have some fun.
It's the right one for me, and we'll do it.
All right, beautiful. You're in. I want to. So, how do you make this transition from Chicago to L.A.? Did you go to New York first, or did you go to L.A.?
Well, I was going to school to be a paramedic, and there was a kid. There was a friend of mine who was in the class, and he was a writer. He was a writer. He was a director. He wanted to be an actor, basically. And he asked me to go with him to an audition one day when we were riding the train in Chicago, the L train. And I went with him because I felt sorry for him, and we were just hanging out. He was my buddy, and so I went to this thing with him, and it was a big cattle call for a Sean Penn picture called Bad Boys.
Yes,
I think it was called.
Esai Morales was in that. Esai Morales.
They were looking for, talent from Chicago, and he went in there and he got dismissed pretty quick, and we were leaving, walking out the door, and actually Martin Brest was there. It was way before Marty Brest, Attorney Chang. He said, I didn't even know who he was at the time, but he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm leaving." And he goes, "Why is that?" And I said, "Well, I just came with my friend." And he said, "Are you going to read?" And I go, "Well, no, because I don't really come there for that." And he said, "Well, do you want to read?" And I said, "Well, sure, but, read what?" And I don't want to sit at that table with these folks. And, I don't know what you guys are doing. There's a little crowded in here. So he took me, actually, it was in a theater, and he took me on the side in the wing of the theater. And he said, "Let's just do it over here." And I said, "Oh, my God, you got to be kidding." He said, "Haven't ever thought of being an actor?" And I said, "Well, no, not really." But I did tell him that I was a big fan of a lot of old pictures, a lot of Bogart stuff and Cagney things.
Yeah.
And so he said, "Okay, you want to read this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure." Meanwhile, my friend, he was looking at me, he was so mad, and I didn't really know what he was mad about then. I mean, I do now, but at the time I didn't understand what he was pissed off about. But I went and I sat down, and I read a couple of pages with Marty Brest, and
wow.
He said, if you went to New York or you went to California, you could probably get work as an actor. And I thought it was funny, and I was laughing. And I said, "Well, listen, how the hell am I going to get there, buddy? Because I think I got about $400 in the bank, and I'm driving a tow truck." And he said, "Well, he asked me if I knew what an agent was, and my sister Virginia had an agent because she was doing
Virginia Madsen.
Singing telegrams. She was doing singing telegrams and auditioning for TV commercials and stuff, right?" Huh. And so I gave him her agent's name, and he knew who she was, and she was pretty respected in Chicago, and he knew her. And he said, "So if I wanted to get in touch with you, I could do it through her." I said, "Well, yeah." And I didn't really think much of it, to be honest with you. But about 2 weeks later, my sister came in the house, and she goes, "Michael, did you meet some people from Los Angeles?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she goes, "Well, they just called my agent, and if you want to go downtown to see her, they want to talk to you about something." And, I went down there and I talked to her, and, Marty Brest had given me a small part in War Games, which later got directed by John Badham. But when Marty walked out of it, he told Badham, he said, "Look, I met this kid in Chicago, and I want to give him this little speaking role, and so keep him." So even though he didn't direct it, he made sure that they kept me in there. And I'm in the missile silo in the opening scenes of the picture. It's even before the title credits.
Wow.
And I'm in there with John Spencer. We're supposed to turn keys to launch ballistic missile, and John can't do it for some reason. And I pull out a pistol and I point it at him, and it's just the opening kind of scene of the movie to create the mood of it and stuff. And they flew me to L.A. and put me up at the Sunset Marquee, and that was the very first thing I ever did.
Wow.
I didn't know what
and then it just took a steamroll from there. Then you started getting work on television shows?
Well, I mean, I got a job pumping gas in Beverly Hills at 6 because I knew I could get a job at any gas station anywhere. And I actually got hired at the gas station before I shot War Games and before I did anything, because I didn't want to go back to Chicago. And I figured if the acting thing didn't work out, I was going to stay there anyway. So I pumped gas for a year, and before I ever got into Gene House.
Wow, amazing how stuff happens. Incredible.
Yeah.
I obviously want to segue it to the Reservoir Dogs. I mean, I want to talk about that if I can, real quick. I want to talk obviously about Reservoir Dogs, and if we can.
Sure.
First of all, do you remember the first time you met Quentin Tarantino?
Well, actually, I got cast as Mr. Blonde in that before I ever even met Quentin.
Oh wow!
I was offered the role flat out. I was represented by the Gersh agency at the time.
Yes, Gersh.
They gave me the script, and I read it, and I thought it was really incredible. But they said you've been offered the role of Mr. Blonde, and they also said, look, this guy's never directed a movie before. It's his first time out, and nobody's in it. Nobody's going to get paid. It was kind of that kind of thing. But when I read it, I thought it was really, really interesting. I knew I read something that was not the normal thing, but I wasn't sure I wanted to play Mr. Blonde. In fact, I told the producer I wanted to play Mr. Pink. And so, you see, because I had worked with Harvey Keitel and Thelma Louise.
Right.
And Harvey and I had become pretty close friends. And in fact, he even became a godfather to my son Max when Max was born. And so, I really wanted to work with Harvey, obviously. And Mr. Pink had more scenes with Harvey than Mr. Blonde. And so, actually, Quentin, God bless him, he let me come in and audition for Mr. Pink, even though I was already offered Mr. Blonde. So, believe me, I studied up Mr. Pink's dialogue, and I went in there. I remember he was standing there, and he goes, so, you want to be Mr. Pink? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, let's see what you got, And so Harvey was there, and I did a couple of scenes of Mr. Pink. I thought I did pretty good. And then at the end of it, Quentin says, is that it? Is that it? I go, yeah. And he goes, well, you're not Mr. Pink. Well, okay. He said, you're either Mr. Blonde or you're not in the movie.
Wow.
So, at that point, I realized, well, good Lord, okay, that I'd rather be in the picture than not in the picture. So,
amazing.
Obviously, it was a good move.
Phenomenal. How blown away were you to know that Quentin knew a lot of your roles from the 80s and the early 80s? He like looked over a lot of your stuff.
Well, I had never heard of him, and I didn't know who he was. I don't think anybody else did either, other than Mario Cassara at Coralco, who stepped up with Live Entertainment to make Reservoir Dogs, and Monty Hellman and Richard Gladstein, who got Harvey Keitel involved. And so, there was a lot of people early on that put that thing together, but obviously, Quentin has...
Yeah, right.
Whenever you do a picture like that, everybody wants to see what comes next.
Exactly.
And if you don't come back with another hit, you get forgotten really fast. And obviously, he proved to everybody, now and forever, that he wasn't a one-hit wonder.
Yeah, amazing. The film came out. When the film came out, did it initially do well at the box office?
Well, it didn't really have a lot of distribution. It
Right.
didn't really come out in a bunch of theaters, and so a lot of people saw it. A lot of people appreciated it, but it wasn't really until Pulp Fiction came out that all of a sudden Reservoir Dogs became something to talk about. And everybody went back and took another look at it, and it became a much, much bigger thing.
Yeah, because it really, took off, obviously, when it went overseas as well. I know you're big in England. You're like Jerry Lewis.
Well, every time I leave the United States, I can make a pretty good living. And,
yeah.
I get a lot of respect out of this country. And I get treated a lot better and with a lot more, with just a lot more respect, I would say, when I'm out of Los Angeles and California.
That's funny.
They're not part of that whole celebrity persecution kind of, let's build them up and knock them down mentality.
Exactly.
It only exists here. Unfortunately, but whatever.
I want to ask you, Michael. So you're laying on the floor in the production office at Reservoir Dogs, and I believe the cop comes up to you and approaches you. Do you remember what he said to you?
Well, that's Kirk Bolton. I hate to tell the story because he hates it when I do tell the story, but like, why is Madsen always telling that story? But he'd come up and if I would put him in the trunk of my car. And I said, Jesus, why? He goes, well, I've never been in the trunk of a car before as a captive, and I just wondered how it would feel. And I had that yellow Cadillac, which was my car at the time, and that same Cadillac is in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood now. It's the picture car that Leo and Brad drive around in. That was my yellow Cadillac from Reservoir. I gave it to Quentin on his birthday when we were making the Hateful Eight.
Oh, wow.
Oh. But, yeah, so that's some trivia for you.
I'll take it.
I said, look, okay, sure, right? So we went outside, and, he had his cop uniform on, actually, because we were going to shoot that afternoon, and he got in the trunk. And, I shut the trunk, and honestly, I suddenly realized, well, I never had a cop in my trunk before. I never had anybody hostage in my trunk. So maybe, we both can learn something out of this experience.
Method acting.
And so, Quentin and Lawrence Binder were in the parking lot at the time, and they kind of noticed what was going on. I realized they were a little concerned. But I got in the car, and I started it up, and I drove off, and I went up the alley with a lot of potholes in the alley. And I was feeling pretty bad for Kirk. And then I was going to turn around. I was going to go back. And I said to him, well, he was yelling back there. And when I got to the end of the alleyway, it was a one-way street. And I couldn't turn to go back around the block. So I had to make a left, which led right up to the main boulevard, and so I had to go that way. So I went up there. When I turned at the lights, I had a good 2 blocks to get back down to the mortuary, and when I turned on the radio, and I started kind of like, emotionally figuring out what it was like to have somebody in there, and I took it a little bit too far. There was a Jack in the Box, and I went through the drive-thru of Jack in the Box. And, yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't really, I got some fries and a Coke, right? And I wasn't trying to, get a I pulled out of there. I went back. I got back to the parking lot. Everybody was in the parking lot. Tim was out there. I think even Lawrence Tierney was around there. And everybody was really concerned. And I pulled up, and I got out, and I had the Coke in my hand, obviously. And I opened up the trunk, and I let him out, and he was not happy. Wow. I mean, to be honest, he was not happy at all. He was very sweaty, and I had a bunch of stuff in the trunk, and I was banging him around, and, I never intended on
Hey, he asked you.
It was just a funny thing that happened, but, when I went inside, it leaned against the wall, and I was doing the rehearsal for when the camera comes back and reveals Mr. Blonde, and I say, you guys gonna bark all day, little doggy, or are you gonna bite?
Are you gonna bark all day, little doggy? Or are you gonna bite? What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. Would you repeat it? Are you gonna bark all day, little doggy? Or are you gonna bite?
We were just rehearsing, but I had the Coke in my hand from the Jack in the Box, and Clinton came over and he goes, "What are you doing with that Coke? Where'd you get that?" And I go, "Well, I went to the freaking Jack in the Box." He said, "You went to Jack in the Box? Kurt in the trunk?" I go, "Well, yeah, actually I did." And so he goes, I like the Coke, and let's keep it. And so I couldn't use the Jack in the Box cup because obviously, some sort of sales pitch. So, but they got me a normal Coke cup so that I could still play that without advertising anybody. But that was where the idea came from Mr. Blonde to be leaning on the freaking pole sipping a Coke, because I actually had been doing that.
Wow. More trivia. Amazing. Amazing.
That's a true story.
It's a classic too, and that's the genius of Tarantino, where he gives you some.
Oh yeah. I mean that is the genius of him, and that was the beginning of me realizing it and seeing it. And, you know, sooner or later the whole world would see that. He's incredibly inventive guy, and he's really, really clever and smart about little things like that. And he's very much into a real moment. And there's nobody like him. I mean, he's a genius. I think that he gave me a career, you know, let's face it.
I mean, he's like the old directors back in the old days. You know, he puts a lot of the old actors incorporates them into his films, like a Bruce Dern or Travolta. But that was pretty much Travolta's comeback on Pulp Fiction, if you remember.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, it was good for John that he was, you know, far from me to tell anybody what John was doing, but that was definitely a great big.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it was a big part of the success of the film, because not only was the picture great, but you know, it was John coming out of obscurity to coming back like that, and I think it had a lot to do with the success of the movie itself.
What's the true Hollywood story that I heard that you were supposed to get that role?
Well, the truth of it is, and you know, there's some people who recently finished making a documentary about me. It's called American Badass. It's been submitted to Sundance, and Quentin's in it. And Quentin tells the truth and tells the true story in the documentary. And I've told the true story myself many times, but people just have this need and this tendency to create their own story of how it happened and this and that. I turned it down, or all these ridiculous things. I was making a picture called The Getaway, and I had with Alec Baldwin. It was a remake of a Steve McQueen picture, and I had a couple of days off, and one of those days was Father's Day, and I wanted to go back to L.A. and visit my son during those days off. And when I got back to L.A., I heard that Larry Kasdan was going to make Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner. And I had been a huge fan of Kirk Douglas. And Kirk Douglas played the greatest Doc Holliday that's ever been put on film. And naturally, I wanted to play Doc Holliday. And so my agent got meeting with Larry Kasdan. And I went in and I sat there and I told him, listen, man, I'd really like to play Doc Holliday. And he said, well, Michael, I already have an actor for Doc Holliday. And I said, well, you know, who is it? He said, Dennis Quaid. And I stood up and I said, well, okay, you know, good luck to you guys. And I was actually walking out the door when he asked me if I would consider playing Virgil. And I said, you know, Virgil was Wyatt's brother. And I said, listen, let me ask you one thing. If I play Virgil, will I be walking down the street to the OK Corral? And he said, well, yeah, of course. And so I took it. I said, I'll do it.
Wow.
I said, call my agent. And I was with CAA at the time. And those guys were pretty big. And I said, call my guy at CAA and put me in. I want to walk down the street to the OK Corral. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that?
Of course. As an actor, of course.
It's a great cowboy picture, man. I'll do it, right?
Right.
So I left, and I went back to Arizona. And I finished shooting The Getaway. And by the time The Getaway was done, I was in New York, actually, and Quentin started asking me about Pulp Fiction. And I said, well, you know, and I read it, and obviously it was incredible. But I had already done Reservoir Dogs, and I was already getting kind of typecast as the tough guy and the guy with the gun and all that kind of stuff. And that was fine, and it was good. And I'm not sorry for 1 second about that, but I really honestly wanted to try something else. And I said, look, you know what? I signed up to do the cowboy picture. I'm going to do Wyatt Earp. And Quentin said, is there any way that you can do them both? And I said, well, yeah, of course, I'd love to be able to do that. But, you know, between the agents and the casting directors and the whole...
Right, the whole system.
You know, they couldn't figure out how to break it up time-wise so I could do both pictures. And I was already contractually, you know, into Wyatt Earp. And so that's what really happened. And that's how it really went down.
And let me ask you this, Michael. Was walking down the OK Corral everything it's cracked up to be?
You know, I mean, you see,
Did you take an Uber?
I mean, personally, walking down that street was everything that I wanted it to be. It was incredible to recreate history and be that guy and go down there for that gunfight. Absolutely. Personally, absolutely. But, you know, I also have to say, honestly, and I've said it before, I thought Wyatt Earp was too long, and I thought it was boring.
Right.
And, you know, Larry hates me for saying that. He's never hired me again. And, you know, I understand why he wouldn't appreciate me saying that, but, you know, I was underused in that picture. I was underplayed, underused, and really badly cut, you know. It was really professional. Personally, it was incredible. Professional for my career, it was not great. And if Wyatt Earp had been a huge hit and Pulp Fiction had belly flopped, people would have thought I was a genius for doing it.
Oh, what a.
But then again, you see, I never would have been in Kill Bill, though. You know, I never, you know, things have a way of balancing themselves out over time. And it's an easy thing for people to say, oh, you could have been in Pulp Fiction. Well, yeah, I could have, but that's not to say that it would have been the same film, or it would have had the same kind of,
right.
effect, you know? I mean, me and John are two different kinds of actors, and
Right, exactly.
You know, it would not have been the same movie, so...
Michael, let me say that I've been very fortunate to have interviewed like 250, 300 well-known actors, very well-known actors, you know, Paul Sorvino's, Larry King's, I've had everybody on. It's because they're all super people. But you are the first guy that Marlon Brando ever called an a-hole.
Oh, yeah.
You're the first
really
one.
True, man. I used to hang out with his son, Chris, and we were hanging out quite a bit. And it was on New Year's Eve. And I was up at Christian's house, and Marlon called the house to talk to Christian. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. And Christian did not want to answer the phone. And he asked me to answer the phone. And I picked it up, and God almighty, it was Marlon. And he was like, my son, I'm going to speak to my son. And I said, oh, you know, he's sleeping. He's busy. He doesn't, he goes, put my son on the phone. You know,
hey, you guys are doing having a party.
I put the phone down and I said, Christian, listen, man. It's your dad on the phone. He really wants to talk to you, man. And I think you should pick it up. And so Christian went in the other room. He picked up the other line. And I was still on the phone. And down my Marlon, you know, he goes, who was that asshole that answered the phone? You know?
Oh, that's beautiful.
I was like, oh, man. So click, you know, I hung up there. But,
that's beautiful.
You know, I said, great. I finally met Marlon Brando.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was kind of funny looking back.
Did you ever get in any conversation with him about talking about acting, the craft itself?
With Marlon?
Yeah.
No. He came over later that night, and him and Christian were having their own conversations, and their father and son moment, and he never struck me to be somebody who's going to sit down and talk about acting, you know, and say,
interesting.
That didn't happen.
Michael, you've been in so many films, you know, the greats like David Niven, even a Brando type of guy, they couldn't stand seeing himself on film. I know David Niven could never. I mean, can you see yourself on film or no?
Well, I mean, it's a funny thing because I don't usually like to see stuff like right after it's finished. Like when it first comes out, I always just have a problem with it. I just, oh man, you know, why did I do this? And why did I do that? Why did I say that word like that? And, you know, I analyze it a little too much, and I tend to not like it.
Yeah.
But then, always, like within some time, you know, like a year later or something, if I see it, I can really appreciate it. And I go, wow, you know what, that wasn't as bad as I thought. And it takes me a little time to warm up to stuff, but then eventually I look back and I realize a lot of things that I did were pretty good.
In 2007, Michael, you made a film called Strength and Honor about a single father who decides to break his dying wife's last wish to not box again in order to save his young son from certain death. That was a special movie for you. It meant a lot.
Well, you know, there's no swearing, there's no guns. And, it was a father and son story, and I had to play a prize fighter that turned into a bare-knuckle fighter, and at the end of the movie, I got to fight Vinnie Jones, and it wasn't a joke. It wasn't something that I could walk through. I took it very, very seriously. The movie was shot in Ireland, and I took months to get in shape, to do it right, and, it was a damn good film, and if it had got the proper distribution and the proper attention, it probably would have changed the direction of my whole career and my life. It was a father and son story, and it was really dark and really emotional. It was one of the finer things that I think I've ever done, and unfortunately, it never really got what it deserved, to be seen, and it was sad, man.
Yeah, it's too bad. Michael, speaking of dark, I want to ask you a question outside the box. You've been, like I said, you've been around for like 35 years in Hollywood itself. You've been, you live in Hollywood, and Hollywood's a very dark town. A lot of people are fascinated by fame, and they don't know there's a dark side. A lot of kids come to L.A. They come by bus, they come by train, they come by plane, whatever they got to do to get out there to try to become famous and get into life. And when that dream dies quickly for a lot of them. There's depression and there's drugs. I mean, have you ever seen firsthand what happens to people who that when the dream dies?
Well, I went through all kinds of that myself. I mean, in the '90s, drinking and snorting blow and all that.
Wow.
Everybody was doing that, and I mean everybody. It was just a normal, natural part of the entertainment business.
Right.
Everybody was doing that. It was just part of the whole thing. But, you have to draw the line sooner or later. And if it doesn't kill you, which it almost practically did to me, and you have a family that you want to take care of, and you have enough respect to be lucky enough to have a career, and if you're smart enough to realize that it's going to be over if you don't straighten your shit out, and you can survive and come back. And getting in the door is one thing.
Right.
But staying in there is a whole other. And, I was lucky enough to survive, and I had enough people looking after me and continued to hire me, and I'm somebody up there must like me because I did come back, and I wanted to take care of my kids and my family.
Right.
And I was always able to pull out of it at one time or another. And it's a hard thing, man. It's still, take me seriously. I've seen a lot of people that were good friends of mine just fall down. And it's really sad. And the worst part about it is as soon as you get that reputation, or as soon as it becomes known that you have a drink here and there, or you might not show up for this or that, all of a sudden you become like a pariah. And people just want to take you out, and they can't wait for you to faceplant. And some of these entertainment shows that want to crucify people who are having bad luck, they'll kill you. And they'll stand there at your grave and applaud. It's a very sad, disgusting part of the business.
Right. Michael,
you can't let it get to you, because if you let it get to you, then they have won the equation. And you just have to sooner or later step aside and say, you know what? I'm blessed. I'm lucky. I got a wife, I got kids, and I got to hang in there and do my thing, because it's too late to do something else.
Right.
I can't just quit and become a lumberjack. I can't go race cars, which is what I really wanted to do in the first place.
Michael,
it becomes an equation where you that's what you're going to do, and that's it.
Right. Mike, I want to talk obviously Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Huge hit, huge hit for you guys, and obviously Tarantino. Before this film, you never actually met DiCaprio. I find that fascinating.
No, I never did, and I everybody has built up their own opinions about certain people, and especially actors. But Quentin asked me to do that picture. It wasn't a big role. It was certainly a good role, but it wasn't more than 2 days of shooting, and I sure as hell wasn't going to say no.
Right.
I mean, good Lord,
Right,
he's my great friend, and I incredibly respect him, and I love him as a friend and a director. He gave me a life, let's face it, and when he came to me to ask me to do that, I thought it was an incredible honor. Of course I wanted to do it, and even though it wasn't a big part, and I was looking forward to working with Leo. I did not know what to expect. I had no idea what he was going to be like, and I never even met him until the day that we had a shoot. And, you know, I have to say, in all honesty and sincerity, he was a great kid, and he was a good friend. I mean, he stood up with me, and, you know, I had been in Puerto Rico, and I hurt myself in Puerto Rico in a stunt, swinging across a river on a tether, and I had banged the side of my hip, and it was bright black purple, my whole left hip. And, you know, I was hurting, you know, I was in a lot of pain. I went to shoot once upon a time 2 days after I got back from Puerto Rico. And I went on the set, and there's Leo up on the horse, and I'm sitting on the porch, and I'm the sheriff, and I had tried to avoid Quentin in the morning because I didn't want him to know that I was a little banged up. And when I went down the steps to the first rehearsal, I sort of kind of, you know, wasn't really, you know, 100% sure of my dialogue, which does not make Quentin happy because he writes very specifically, and you have to say exactly what he wrote. And it's really rude not to say it exactly as he wrote it, you know?
Right.
I mean, he let me ad-lib a bunch of stuff in Reservoir Dogs and Kill Bill and Hell Ride.
Yeah.
You know, I always did that, and he always let me do it. But I was always very, very considerate, and obviously 100% wanting to say things exactly as he wrote them. And then once upon a time, when I started going off in some other direction, he was like, no, not this time, Michael. You're going to say exactly what I wrote. And so, you know, Leo kind of knew right away that I wasn't, you know, going to do that. And thank God it was lunchtime, and I said, Leo, come here. I said, you know, let's chat for a minute.
Right.
And he jumped off the horse, God bless him, and he came with me, and we went in a tent, you know, that they had air conditioned because, man, it had to be like 120 degrees out there in that town, and that cowboy town.
Right.
And me and him went in the tent, and we sat down. And he goes, what's wrong? And I said, I'll show you what's wrong. And I opened up the front of I opened up the side of my cowboy pants, and I said, look at my hip. And, you know, it was purple and black, you know. And I said, look, man, you know, I banged my in Puerto Rico. And he goes, oh, my God. He goes, Michael, oh, my God. I mean, it was pretty bad, you know. But I had to show him. There was no way to explain it. You know, and I said, look, man, I'm just in pain. I'm in agony. I said, you know, forgive me, man, because I want this to be good. And he, God bless him, you know what? He said, you know what, Mike, let's run it. Let's run it until you know it. And I sat down, and we did it like 10 times.
Wow.
And he was very calm and very nice and very calm about it. And he knew his stuff, that's for sure. And my son Max was in the tent at the time, which was pretty amazing for my son to witness these two guys doing that. But when we went back out to do it, I was right there. And
Michael, you mentioned. I'm sorry, Michael. You mentioned your documentary coming out called American Badass, a Michael Madsen retroactive. When is that coming out? Yeah. Do we know?
Well, it's been submitted to Sundance, and Mario Casar, who was the original producer of Reservoir Dogs at Live Entertainment, he's in it, and I think he's going to help with distribution, as far as I know. But if it makes it into Sundance, it'll be in January. And I watched it yesterday. I watched it on my birthday at the Chateau Marmont.
And how was it?
I was staying there for my birthday, and the producer came over, and the producer, he came over and he showed it to me. He put it on his laptop and he showed it to me and my family. And I have to tell you, you know, what started out to be some sort of strange, egocentric kind of a vanity tour turned out to be something really beyond what I ever could have imagined. It's very well done and really respectfully done.
Beautiful.
There's a lot of pretty good actors and directors that they got a hold of a lot of clips and a lot of old footage of me when I was just a little kid, and they took me back to Chicago, back to my hometown, and they filmed a lot of things that they put it all together. And my family, believe me, they've seen enough, and they've seen it all in one way or another.
Right.
And to keep them and my wife in that room to watch that, it's an hour and 20 minutes. Nobody got up. Nobody left the room. Nobody said nothing. To do my family, my wife, believe me, man, if that thing was a crapshoot, I would have known it pretty quick. And that would be the toughest audience to show it to. And
right.
I was really astounded.
That's beautiful.
It's pretty damn good.
That's beautiful.
It's pretty good.
Michael, before we go, I want to talk a little bit about a film that I know is going to really means a lot to you, near and dear to your heart. Your son Christian wrote and directed a film called Dinner with Grandma. How was that working with your son? I know you had a small part.
Well, I wanted to help him make it. I wanted to help it get done. But, obviously he knew if I can get Dad in here, I can probably get the money in. So, he's my son, I really got to say, no, I'm sorry, I'll talk to my agent, Obviously, I wanted to do it for him, and so I did. And, I was flattered that he wanted his dad, and I was, proud of my son for, I made a short film with my son Max called A Night in Jail. And so for sure I was going to help Christian as I would any of my sons. Right. And I did it with him, and, I saw it. I think it's pretty good. I played the owner of a strip club, and my mother's in the damn thing. She plays Grandma, who she really is, Christian's grandma. So, it was.
That's beautiful.
It took a while.
That's beautiful.
It was not an easy shoot. It took a while. We had no money, and but God bless him, he hung in there, and he's trying to be an actor, and he's doing it. And both my sons, Max and Christian, are both pursuing an acting career.
Chip off the old block, right? Chip off the old block.
Well, you know what the truth is, pal? I'll tell you the truth. I would prefer that the both of them would do anything else. And I would try to persuade them to do anything else but try to be an actor.
Be a CEO or something.
It's a tough life, and it's an emotional roller coaster of a life. It does a lot of harm to your personal life, and it's a hard way for kids to grow up when your dad's away all the time, and it can be really tough on a normal life. And I try to tell them both, guys, do something else. Go do something else.
Michael, real quick.
But, I set the bar a little too high, and now that's what they both want to do, and that's what they're going to do. Damn it,
Michael, real quick. Like I said, you've been in the industry for like almost 4 decades. Is there an actor or a director you always wanted to work with you never did?
Yeah. I would say Clint Eastwood.
Oh, wow.
I never met Clint. I've met everybody.
Wow.
I really have.
You never met Clint?
For some weird reason, I'd never met Clint, and I always would have thought that I would have fit into that thing. I could have been the son of Dirty Harry. I could have brought that whole franchise back to life, and I never got to meet him, and I never got to do anything with him, and I don't know why. Just circumstances, I guess. I don't know.
Well,
a mystery to me.
Oh, Michael, you're one of the greats, and I appreciate your time, and thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for doing this, and I'm a big fan, and a lot of my buddies are big fans of your work, and continued success.
Sure.
And many more. I'll be keeping an eye out for your documentary. So thank you so much, Michael.
It's good, man.
I'm sure.
No, listen, I'm flattered you want to be on the show. I haven't done any kind of publicity for once upon a time, and I haven't been chasing publicity for most of my career. I don't really understand it to a certain degree, but I respect you for having me on this show. I appreciate it.
I thank you. Wow, and there you have it, the great Michael Madsen. I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is currently still out, and he's got a lot of projects coming up. Keep an eye out for his documentary. I'm sure it's going to be phenomenal, because if you see the people that are out talking about him in his documentary, it's phenomenal. Everybody from Hollywood and everybody who's big names in Hollywood are in that documentary, and keep an eye out for that. It's going to hit Sundance pretty soon. And that's it. That's a lot of what we do here, guys. We get the biggest stars in Hollywood join us each and every week right here on Real Talk with the Hollywood Kid every Saturday at 2 p.m. And check us out on SoundCloud. Like my Facebook page, Real Talk with the Hollywood Kid, the REEL, Real Talk with the Hollywood Kid, or follow me on Facebook at Mike DeStasio and Twitter as well. And that's what we do, guys. And stick around for my man, the mighty, mighty DJ PR, spinning the disco classics right here on WNTN. Nobody else is doing a show like that either as well, guys. So that's what we do here. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies, spread the word about this show because it's the best thing going today. Bam! If you like this interview, please click the subscribe button and click the notification bell to be notified whenever we upload a new episode.